Far past the orbit of Neptune, where the sun was only a bright star and the cold was deep enough to freeze thought itself, a small scout ship drifted through the dark. It moved slowly, its engines barely humming, sensors sweeping the empty space around it. The pilot was a reptilian being named Slex, a scout for the Caldrath Directorate, one of the older and more powerful powers in the galaxy. Slex had flown this patrol route 100 times before. It was always the same. Empty rock, empty ice, nothing worth reporting. But today was different. His sensors picked up something strange, a faint energy signature, buried deep inside a large asteroid that the star charts listed as nothing more than debris. It was not natural. No asteroid gave off a heat signature like that, steady and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Slex leaned closer to his console, his clawed fingers tapping keys, running the scan again to be sure. The signature was still there. He checked his charts. This region of space belonged to the human system, a system that had been under a strict technology treaty for 80 years. Humans were not allowed to build large ships. They were not allowed to develop advanced weapons. They were not allowed to do much of anything, except live quietly on their planet and trade simple goods with the wider galaxy. The Caldrath Directorate had made sure of that, ever since the war that no one liked to talk about anymore. Slex had heard the stories, the way every scout in the Directorate had heard them. Humans were dangerous once, not because they had powerful ships or strange weapons, but because they learned fast. Too fast. In just a few short years during the First Contact War, human engineers had reverse-engineered captured technology and built weapons that surprised even seasoned Directorate officers. The war had ended only because the Directorate brought overwhelming numbers, more ships than humanity could ever hope to match. After that, the humans were forced to sign the treaty. Their technology was capped, their shipyards were inspected, their scientists were watched. And yet here was a heat signature, deep inside a supposedly empty asteroid, right on the edge of their system. Syslex's orders were clear. Investigate anything unusual. Report back immediately if there was any sign of treaty violation. He guided his small ship closer, engines silent, sensors on full alert. The asteroid grew larger in his viewport, a dull gray rock tumbling slowly through space. From the outside, it looked like nothing at all, but his instruments told a different story. There was a structure inside, a big one. He was about to send a message back to Directorate Command when his console lit up with a warning. Something had detected him. Before Slex could react, 3 shapes peeled away from the shadow of the asteroid. They were sleek and dark, almost invisible until they moved, and they moved with a grace that no Directorate ship could match. Syslex's threat scanner struggled to identify them. No match found. No match found. The words blinked red across his screen. A voice came through his comm, calm and steady, speaking in perfect Directorate trade language. You have entered restricted space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted out of the system. Slex's claws trembled slightly as he reached for his own weapons controls. He was a scout, not a warrior, but instinct told him to defend himself. Before his hand even reached the switch, one of the 3 shapes moved. It did not fire. It did not need to. A pulse of energy wrapped around his ship like an invisible hand, and every system he had went dark at once. Engines, weapons, even his emergency beacon. For a moment, Syslax floated in silence, his ship dead in space, surrounded by shadows that should not exist. Then his systems flickered back on, one by one, and the voice spoke again. You will remember nothing of value here. Return to your fleet, and tell them Sol system remains closed. That is all. The 3 shapes vanished back into the darkness of the asteroid, leaving Slex alone with his racing heart, and a dead ship slowly coming back to life. He did not understand what had just happened. He did not understand how his weapons had been disabled without a single shot fired, or how ships that advanced could exist in a system that was supposed to have no advanced ships at all. But he understood one thing clearly. He needed to report this, immediately. Deep inside that same asteroid, in a control room lit by soft blue light, a woman named Dr. Amara Chen watched a wall of screens showing the retreating scout ship. She was the chief engineer of a project that very few people in the galaxy knew existed, a project called Forge Site Zero. He's leaving, said a voice beside her. It belonged to Commander Marcus Cole, a broad-shouldered man in a simple gray uniform, his eyes fixed on the same screens. "Think he'll actually keep quiet?" "No," Amara said, shaking her head. "He'll report it. Scouts always report anomalies, especially ones near Sol. The Directorate has had eyes on us for 80 years. They're not going to ignore a heat signature this big." Marcus sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Then we don't have as much time as we thought." Amara turned to face him, her expression tired but determined. She had spent the last 15 years of her life inside this asteroid, working on something that most of humanity did not even know existed. The people back on Earth believed their system was quiet, that the treaty was being followed, that humanity was still the small, weak species the Directorate believed it to be. Only a handful of people, scientists, engineers, and a few trusted officials, knew the truth. Deep inside this hollowed-out rock, humanity had been building something far greater than the treaty allowed. A warship. Not a small patrol craft. Not a simple defense platform. A true warship, built from decades of secret research, salvaged alien technology, and human ingenuity that the rest of the galaxy had underestimated for far too long. "How close are we to completion?" Marcus asked. 94%, Amara answered. "The main reactor is stable. The weapon systems are online and tested. We're still calibrating the shield harmonics, but that's a matter of weeks, not months." "Weeks we might not have," Marcus muttered. Amara walked to the main viewport, a thick window of reinforced glass that looked out over the massive construction bay, hidden inside the asteroid. There, suspended in a web of scaffolding and support arms, was the ship they had spent so many years building. It was long and sleek, its hull a dark matte gray that seemed to drink in the light around it. Rows of weapon emplacements ran along its spine, and near the bow, a massive cluster of sensor arrays gave it an almost watchful appearance, like a great sleeping predator waiting to open its eyes. They called it the ESS Prometheus. Amara remembered the day the project began, back when she was a young engineer fresh out of university. The war with the Directorate had ended just a few years before, and Earth was still recovering from the shock of losing, of realizing just how small humanity truly was in the vast galaxy. The treaty had been humiliating. No advanced weapons, no large warships, regular inspections to make sure humanity stayed weak and compliant. But there had been a secret clause in humanity's plans that no inspector ever found. A shipyard built not on Earth, not on the moon, not anywhere the Directorate's inspectors were allowed to search, but hidden deep inside an asteroid, far beyond Neptune, in a region of space so cold and empty that no one thought to look there. It had taken decades to build, decades of careful secrecy, of smuggled resources, of scientists and engineers who gave up years of their lives to work in the dark, quite literally, so that one day, humanity would not be as helpless as it had been during the First War. That day was coming faster than anyone expected. "We need to tell the Council," Marcus said finally. "If the Directorate is sending scouts this close, they suspect something. We can't keep this hidden much longer." Amara nodded slowly. The Council, he meant, was not the public government of Earth, but a small, secret group of leaders who had known about Forge Site Zero from the very beginning. They would need to be told that their carefully guarded secret might soon be exposed. "I'll send the message," she said. "But Marcus, listen to me. If the Directorate comes back, and comes back with more than a scout ship, we might not have a choice anymore. We might have to show them what we've built, ready or not." Marcus looked back at the ship floating in its scaffolding, its dark hull catching the low light of the construction bay. 94% complete. Close, but not finished. Not ready, not truly. Not the way he wanted it to be when it finally left this asteroid and flew free for the first time. But the galaxy did not care what humanity wanted. It never had. Far across the stars, in a command hub that orbited one of the Kaldrath Directorate's core worlds, Sleek sat nervously in a waiting room, clutching a data slate that contained his scan reports. He had been summoned before Grand Admiral Korvath himself, a rare and frightening honor for a lowly scout pilot. The doors slid open, and Slex was led into a large chamber, where a tall, armored figure stood, looking out over a massive star map. Grand Admiral Korvath did not turn immediately. He simply asked, in a low, rumbling voice, "Tell me what you saw." Slex explained everything. The heat signature. The ships that appeared from nowhere. The way his own weapons had been disabled without a single shot fired. As he spoke, he could feel the tension building in the room, could see the other officers exchanging worried glances. When he finished, silence filled the chamber. Korvath finally turned, his eyes narrow and calculating. Humans, he said slowly, as if tasting the word. Weak, primitive humans, who we allowed to keep their little planet as long as they stayed obedient. Sir, Sleck said carefully, the ships I saw were not primitive. Their technology outmatched anything I have encountered. Korvath was quiet for a long moment, staring at the star map, at the small marker that represented the human system, so far from the heart of Directorate space, so easily forgotten in the vastness of the galaxy. Send word to the fleet, Korvath said finally. We are going to pay Sol System a visit. It is time we reminded humanity exactly who holds the power in this galaxy. Behind him, on the star map, a cluster of ship icons began to move, slowly turning toward a small, unremarkable star system that no one in the galaxy expected would soon become the center of everyone's attention. News of the scouts' report spread quickly through the halls of Directorate Command, and within 2 days, Grand Admiral Korvath had assembled a fleet. 12 warships, each one a proven veteran of countless campaigns across Directorate space, gathered in high orbit above the Kaldrath homeworld, before setting a course for the distant human system. Korvath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Ashwind, watching the stars blur past as the fleet made the long jump toward Sol. He was not worried. He told himself this again and again during the journey. Humans were weak. They had been weak during the First War, and 80 years of a strict treaty had made sure they stayed that way. Whatever strange ships the scout had seen were likely some kind of trick, a bluff meant to scare off inspections, or perhaps smuggled technology, bought from some rogue trader looking to make a profit. Either way, a full fleet of 12 warships would be more than enough to remind humanity of its place. But not everyone shared his confidence. Aboard the Ashwind, a political officer named Velen watched the same stars with a far more cautious expression. Velen had studied the reports from the First Contact War extensively, back when he was a young officer training for a career in diplomacy rather than combat. He remembered the old accounts, the ones that were rarely spoken of anymore, describing how quickly humans had adapted during that conflict, how they had taken captured Directorate technology and improved upon it within months, not years, how human engineers had built weapons that should have taken decades to develop, using nothing more than salvaged parts and sheer determination. Grand Admiral, Velen said carefully, approaching Korvath at his command station. Might I suggest a more cautious approach, perhaps a smaller force first, to assess the situation before committing the full fleet? Korvath did not even turn to look at him. The humans need to see strength, Velen, not caution. If we approach with a handful of ships, they will believe they can defy us. 12 warships will make our position clear. Velen said nothing more, though the uneasy feeling in his chest did not fade. Far behind the approaching fleet, back on Earth, an emergency session of the Secret Council had been called. It met in a quiet underground chamber beneath a government building in Geneva, a room with no windows and walls thick enough to block any outside signal. Around a long table sat 12 people, representatives from every major nation on Earth, along with Dr. Amara Chen and Commander Marcus Cole, who had traveled back from Forge Site Zero to brief them in person. "You're telling us," said one representative, an older woman named Director Okafor, "that a Directorate scout ship found our shipyard, and now they're sending a fleet." "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "Our long-range sensors picked up the fleet forming near the Kaldrath homeworld 3 days ago. Based on their heading and speed, they'll reach the edge of our system within the week." A murmur of concern spread around the table. For 80 years, this council had lived with the constant fear of this exact moment, the moment when their secret would finally be discovered, when the Directorate would come to see what humanity had truly been building all this time. "How many ships?" another representative asked. 12, based on our best estimates, Amara answered. "All confirmed warships, likely similar in class to what we faced during the First War." Director Okafor rubbed her temples, clearly weighing the weight of the decision ahead. "And the Prometheus? Is it ready?" Amara hesitated. 96% complete as of this morning. The main systems are fully operational. We've been running combat simulations around the clock, but there are still some calibrations left to finish, particularly with the long-range weapon systems. 96% will have to be enough, Marcus said firmly. If the Directorate fleet crosses into our system and starts scanning, they'll find Forge Site Zero eventually, whether we're ready or not. We need a plan. The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled over everyone present. For 80 years, humanity had lived under the shadow of the treaty, forced to appear weak, forced to hide any sign of progress, all while quietly building something that could finally change their place in the galaxy. That plan had always assumed they would have more time. Time to finish the Prometheus, time to build more ships, time to prepare humanity, not just militarily, but emotionally, for the moment when the rest of the galaxy would learn the truth. That time had just run out. We have two options, Director Okafor said slowly. We can try to hide the shipyard, power down all systems, and hope the Directorate fleet simply performs a routine inspection and leaves without finding anything unusual. Or we reveal the Prometheus, Marcus finished, and show them exactly what we've built. That's an enormous risk, another representative argued. If we show our hand too early, before we're truly ready, we could provoke a war we're not prepared to win. 12 warships is a serious force, Commander. Are you certain the Prometheus alone could stand against them? Marcus exchanged a glance with Amara before answering. The Prometheus was designed from the ground up, using technology decades ahead of what the Directorate used during the First War. Our shields, our weapons, even our engines, all of it was built by studying our enemy's own systems and improving on every weakness we found. I won't promise you an easy victory, but I believe the Prometheus can hold its own against that fleet, and possibly do far more than that. Director Okafor studied him for a long moment, then looked around the table at the other representatives, searching their faces for any sign of hesitation or doubt. We built Forge Site Zero for exactly this moment, she said finally. The moment when hiding was no longer an option. If the Directorate is truly coming to test us, then perhaps it's time we stopped hiding altogether. A vote was called, and one by one, the representatives raised their hands in agreement. The decision was made. If the Directorate fleet crossed into the inner boundary of the Sol system, the Prometheus would be activated and sent to intercept them. Back at Forge Site Zero, the news of the Council's decision reached Amara and Marcus just hours before they departed for the asteroid once more. The journey back felt longer than usual, both of them lost in their own thoughts as their small transport ship cut through the darkness of space. 96%, Marcus said quietly, breaking the silence. That's what we're taking into this. It's enough, Amara replied, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty she couldn't quite hide. The core systems are solid, the weapons work, we've tested everything that matters. I know. Marcus turned to look at her. I just keep thinking about everyone who worked on this project. 15 years, some of them longer. People who gave up everything, who worked in secret, never getting credit, never even able to tell their own families what they were building. All of it comes down to this moment. Amara nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She thought of her own mentor, an old engineer named Dr. Halverson, who had died 5 years earlier, without ever seeing the Prometheus completed. He had dedicated the last 20 years of his life to this project, believing wholeheartedly that humanity deserved better than the treaty had given them. She wished he could be here now, to see what they had built. When their transport finally docked inside the asteroid, they found the entire crew of Forge Site Zero already preparing for what was to come. Engineers rushed through corridors carrying diagnostic equipment. Weapons technicians ran final checks on the Prometheus's armaments. In the control room, a wall of screens tracked the approaching Directorate fleet, now less than 2 days from the edge of the system. Amara made her way to the command deck, where a young pilot named Lieutenant Sarah Winters was running through pre-flight checks for the Prometheus itself. "How's she looking?" Amara asked. "Better than I expected," Sarah said, glancing up from her console with a tired smile. "Reactor output is stable, shields are holding steady, and the main weapon batteries are all reading green. If they push us into a fight, I think we're ready." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Amara said, though she doubted her own words even as she spoke them. Over the following day, the Directorate fleet continued its approach, moving steadily closer to the outer edge of the Sol system. Aboard the Ashwind, Grand Admiral Korvath studied the latest sensor readings with growing impatience. "Still no response from the humans," he said, addressing his bridge crew. "No hails, no communications, nothing. Perhaps they haven't detected us yet, sir, an officer suggested. Korvath scoffed. Or perhaps they're hiding, hoping we'll simply turn around and leave. Increase speed. I want to reach their homeworld within the day. Velen, standing quietly near the back of the bridge, felt his unease growing with every passing hour. Something about this entire situation felt wrong to him, a nagging sense that they were walking into something far more complicated than a simple inspection. He was not wrong. As the Directorate fleet crossed the invisible boundary marking the edge of humanity's claimed territory, alarms began flashing across every console inside Forge Site 0. Marcus stood on the command deck, watching the 12 red markers on the star map slowly creep closer to Earth. "They've crossed the line," he said, his voice steady, despite the tension in the room. Amara looked at him, then at the massive shape of the Prometheus, visible through the viewport, finally free of its scaffolding, floating silently in the construction bay, fully armed and ready. "Then it's time," she said. Marcus nodded slowly, took a deep breath, and gave the order that would change everything. "Prepare the Prometheus for launch." The great doors of Forge Site 0 opened for the first time in 15 years, splitting the asteroid apart, like the shell of an egg breaking open. Massive panels of rock and metal slid aside, revealing the dark emptiness of space beyond, and slowly, silently, the ESS Prometheus began to move forward under its own power for the very first time. Inside the command deck, Marcus Cole sat in the captain's chair, his hands steady on the console in front of him despite the nervous energy running through the entire crew. Around him, dozens of officers and technicians manned their stations, faces lit by the soft glow of holographic displays. Lieutenant Sarah Winters guided the ship carefully out of the asteroid, her fingers moving with practiced precision across the flight controls. "Clear of the shipyard," Sarah announced. "All systems reading green." "Take us toward the fleet," Marcus said. "Slow and steady. Let's see what they do." Behind him, Amara Chen stood near the engineering station, monitoring the ship's core systems with a careful eye. 15 years of work, countless sleepless nights, entire lifetimes dedicated to this single moment, and now it was finally happening. She felt a strange mix of pride and fear settle in her chest as the Prometheus glided silently through the darkness, its dark hull barely visible against the black of space. Meanwhile, aboard the Ashwind, Grand Admiral Korvath's fleet had reached the outer defense perimeter of the Sol system, though they had encountered no resistance so far. No ships, no weapons platforms, nothing but empty space, and the distant blue marble of Earth growing larger on their scanners. "Still nothing," Korvath muttered, half disappointed. Part of him had almost hoped for a confrontation, an excuse to demonstrate the full might of the Directorate fleet, and remind humanity exactly why they had been defeated so easily 80 years ago. "Sir," an officer called out suddenly, "we're picking up an energy signature. Something large, approaching from the outer system." Korvath straightened in his seat. "Show me." The main view screen shifted to display a single ship emerging from the shadow of a distant asteroid field, moving steadily toward the Directorate fleet. Korvath studied the readout with narrowed eyes. The ship was large, larger than anything the sensors had cataloged from human designs, its hull composed of some dark material that seemed to absorb the light around it. "Scan it," Korvath ordered. The sensor officer worked quickly, then frowned at his results. "Sir, I'm getting conflicting readings. The hull composition doesn't match anything in our database. Energy output is significantly higher than expected for a vessel of this size." "Significantly higher how much?" Korvath demanded. "At least 3 times greater than our own flagship, sir." A tense silence fell over the bridge. Velen, standing near the back, felt his stomach tighten with the confirmation of everything he had feared since the scout's original report. "Open a channel," Korvath said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I want to speak with whoever is commanding that ship." Moments later, on the Prometheus, Marcus received the incoming transmission request. He glanced at Amara, who gave him a small nod, and then accepted the channel. Grand Admiral Korvath's image appeared on the main view screen, his armored features stern and unreadable. "This is Grand Admiral Korvath of the Kaldrath Directorate Fleet. You are approaching restricted military vessels within a treaty-controlled system. Identify yourself, and power down your weapons immediately." Marcus met the alien commander's gaze without flinching. "This is Commander Marcus Cole of the ESS Prometheus. representing the sovereign defense forces of Earth. Grand Admiral, your fleet has entered our system without prior authorization. I would ask the same of you. State your intentions and withdraw to the treaty boundary. Korvath's expression flickered with something between surprise and anger. The Technological Restriction Treaty grants the Directorate the right to inspect any human vessel or facility suspected of treaty violations. That ship behind you should not exist, Commander. I suggest you power down before this situation escalates. With respect, Grand Admiral, Marcus replied calmly. The treaty also grants humanity the right to defend our territory from unauthorized military incursions. Your fleet is currently well within our claimed space. I'm asking you, one final time, to withdraw peacefully. For a long moment, Korvath simply stared at the screen, his jaw tight with suppressed fury. He had not expected this. He had not expected humans, weak, primitive humans, to speak to him with such calm defiance, backed by a ship that his own sensors could not fully explain. You dare to threaten a Directorate fleet with a single vessel? Korvath finally said, his voice dropping low and dangerous. Whatever that ship of yours can do, it cannot stand against 12 warships, Commander. I suggest you reconsider your position, before I am forced to demonstrate exactly how outmatched you truly are. The channel cut off abruptly. On the Prometheus, silence hung over the command deck for a long moment, before Amara spoke quietly. He's not going to back down. No, Marcus agreed. He's not. Aboard the Ashwind, Korvath turned to his weapons officer, his patience finally at its end. Target that ship. All batteries. Fire a warning volley across its bow. Let's remind these humans exactly who they're dealing with. The order was carried out immediately. A dozen streaks of energy lanced out from the Directorate fleet, cutting through space toward the Prometheus, in a deliberate, controlled pattern, meant to intimidate rather than destroy. Incoming fire, Sarah called out from the helm. Shields, Marcus ordered calmly. The Prometheus's shields flared to life, a shimmering barrier of energy that absorbed the incoming volley without so much as a flicker of instability. On the bridge of the Ashwind, the weapons officer stared at his readouts in disbelief. Sir, the warning shots had no effect. Their shields absorbed everything, without any noticeable strain. Korvath's grip tightened on the arms of his command chair. This was not going according to plan. Full spread. All weapons. Target their shield generators directly. This time, the entire fleet opened fire. 12 ships unleashing everything they had at the single human vessel, drifting silently before them. Streams of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles filled the space between the two forces, an overwhelming barrage that should have been more than enough to cripple any ship in the galaxy. Inside the Prometheus, the crew braced themselves as the barrage struck their shields, the entire ship shuddering slightly under the impact. Amara watched her console carefully, monitoring the shield integrity readings. Shields holding at 92%, she reported. The harmonic dampeners are working exactly as designed. Marcus allowed himself a small breath of relief, before turning back to the tactical display. Enough demonstrations. Sarah, bring us within engagement range. Amara, charge the primary weapon array. Charging now, Amara confirmed, her fingers flying across her console. Full power in 15 seconds. The Prometheus surged forward, closing the distance between itself and the Directorate fleet, with surprising speed for a ship of its size. Aboard the Ashwind, alarm bells began sounding as the human vessel closed rapidly, its intentions now unmistakably clear. They're advancing, the sensor officer called out, panic creeping into his voice. Sir, their weapon systems are charging, output levels are. I've never seen readings like this. Korvath's confidence finally cracked, replaced by the first true flicker of fear. Evasive maneuvers, all ships. Fall back to defensive formation. But it was already too late. The Prometheus's primary weapon array fired, a brilliant lance of concentrated energy that tore through the void and struck one of the Directorate warships directly amidships. The impact was catastrophic, the alien vessel's shields overwhelmed in an instant, its hull splitting open as internal explosions rippled through its structure. Within seconds, the ship was little more than drifting wreckage. Stunned silence gripped the bridge of the Ashwind. No Directorate weapon could achieve that kind of destructive power in a single shot, not against a ship of that size. Fire everything we have, Korvath shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. All ships. Converge fire on that vessel. The remaining 11 ships unleashed everything they had, filling the space around the Prometheus with a storm of weapons fire. But the human ship moved with a grace and speed that defied its massive size, its shields flaring bright as they absorbed the punishing barrage, its own weapons continuing to fire in calculated, devastating bursts. One by one, the Directorate ships fell. Some were destroyed outright, torn apart by the Prometheus's powerful weapons. Others were disabled, their engines and weapon systems crippled by precisely targeted strikes that left the crews alive, but the ships helpless. Marcus had given clear orders before the battle began, orders that Amara had fought hard to convince him were necessary. "We don't need to kill them all," she had argued. "We need to make our point clear, not start a war we don't need to fight." Marcus had agreed, and now, as the battle raged, the crew of the Prometheus followed that strategy precisely, disabling ships whenever possible, rather than destroying them outright, sending a clear message, rather than simply seeking victory through annihilation. Within 20 minutes, the battle was over. Of the 12 ships that had entered the Sol system with such confidence, 3 had been destroyed, and 7 others disabled, drifting helplessly in space, with heavily damaged systems. Only 2 ships remained combat-capable, including the badly damaged Ashwind itself. On the bridge of his flagship, Grand Admiral Korvath stared at the wreckage of his once proud fleet, his expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. Velen stood beside him, equally stunned, though a small part of him could not help but feel a grim sense of vindication at having his fears so thoroughly confirmed. The Prometheus hailed the Ashwind once more, and this time, Korvath answered immediately, all traces of arrogance gone from his voice. "Grand Admiral," Marcus said, his tone still calm despite the devastating victory his ship had just achieved. "I believe we've made our point clear. I suggest you take your remaining ships and return to Directorate space. And Grand Admiral, when you report back to your command, tell them exactly what happened here today. Tell them that humanity is no longer the weak, primitive species you once defeated. Tell them Earth's doors are open now, and we intend to defend what is ours." Korvath said nothing for a long moment, simply staring at the screen with an expression that mixed fury with something close to fear. Finally, he gave a single, stiff nod and cut the transmission. As the surviving Directorate ships began their slow retreat, their emergency beacons already transmitting reports of the battle back toward Directorate space and beyond, word of what had happened in the Sol system began to spread. It would not stay contained for long. Within days, the story would reach every corner of the galaxy, carried by traders, diplomats, and frightened crew members eager to share what they had witnessed. Humanity's hidden shipyard had opened, and the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. Within a week, the story of what happened in the Sol system had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. It began with the surviving Directorate crews, who could not keep silent about what they had witnessed, no matter how much their commanders wanted the incident buried. Traders picked up fragments of the story at neutral space stations. Diplomats whispered about it in private meetings. News networks across a dozen different alien civilizations began broadcasting increasingly wild accounts of a single human warship defeating an entire Directorate fleet. By the time the story reached the more distant corners of the galaxy, it had grown even larger than the truth, though the truth itself was already remarkable enough. Some versions claimed humanity had destroyed the entire fleet. Others insisted the ship was some kind of ancient weapon humans had discovered rather than built themselves. A few outlandish reports even suggested humanity had secretly allied with some unknown, more powerful civilization. Whatever version people heard, the reaction across the galaxy was largely the same: panic, confusion, and a sudden, urgent need to understand exactly what had changed. On the core world of the Velkari Trade Union, a species known throughout the galaxy for their vast commercial networks, emergency meetings were called within hours of the first reports arriving. A tall, elegant being, named Trade Speaker Nissa, stood before her council, her 4 eyes narrowed with concern, as she addressed the gathered representatives. "If these reports are accurate," she said, "then everything we understood about the balance of power in this region of the galaxy needs to be reconsidered. The Kaldrath Directorate has always been one of the strongest military powers we deal with. If a single human ship can defeat their fleet so decisively, we need to understand what that means for our trade agreements, our security arrangements, everything." Around the room, murmurs of agreement rippled through the council members. The Velkari Trade Union had always maintained careful neutrality, profiting from trade with dozens of different species without taking sides in their conflicts. But a shift in power this significant could not be ignored. Should we attempt to establish contact with the humans directly? One council member asked. Carefully, Nissa replied. Very carefully. Meanwhile, in the vast military stronghold of the Threll Assembly, a species known for their aggressive expansion and constant border conflicts, the reaction was far less measured. General Vrask, commander of the Assembly's Northern Fleet, slammed his fist against a briefing table as he listened to the reports. The Directorate has grown weak, he snarled to his assembled officers. If a backwater species like the humans can humiliate their fleet so thoroughly, then perhaps it is time the Assembly reconsiders its own borders, near their territory. Perhaps there are opportunities here that we have been too cautious to pursue. Not everyone in the room shared his enthusiasm. A younger officer, Commander Zeth, spoke up cautiously. General, with respect, if the humans truly possess technology capable of defeating a Directorate war fleet, would it not be wiser to avoid provoking them until we understand their full capabilities? Vrask waved away the concern, with obvious irritation. Fear breeds hesitation, Commander. Hesitation breeds weakness. We will not make the same mistake the Directorate made, underestimating a threat while doing nothing to prepare for it. But neither will we cower before rumors and exaggerated reports. Send scouts. I want real intelligence, not second-hand stories, before we commit to any course of action. Across the galaxy, similar conversations played out in dozens of different council chambers, military command centers, and diplomatic offices. Species that had never given Earth a second thought suddenly found themselves scrambling to understand exactly what had happened, and more importantly, what it might mean for them. The greatest reaction, unsurprisingly, came from within the Kaldrath Directorate itself. Grand Admiral Korvath returned to Directorate space with the shattered remains of his once proud fleet, and the political fallout was immediate and severe. He was summoned before the full Directorate High Council within days of his return, forced to explain in humiliating detail exactly how a single human vessel had managed to inflict such devastating losses on a fleet of 12 warships. Explain to this council, demanded High Counselor Threxa, an imposing figure who had overseen Directorate military policy for over 3 decades, how you allowed this to happen. Korvath stood before the assembled council, his usual confidence replaced by a grim, defeated posture. Counselor, the human vessel possessed technology far beyond anything in our current intelligence assessments. Their shields absorbed our combined firepower with minimal degradation. Their weapon systems inflicted catastrophic damage with a single strike. We were unprepared for a threat of this magnitude. Unprepared, Threxa repeated coldly. The Technological Restriction Treaty was designed specifically to prevent this exact scenario, Grand Admiral. Explain to this council how humanity managed to develop and construct a vessel of this capability, without our inspectors noticing. I do not have a complete answer to that question, Counselor, Korvath admitted. But based on the scale and sophistication of the technology we witnessed, it is clear the humans have been working on this project for a considerable amount of time, likely years, possibly decades. A tense silence fell over the council chamber, as the implications settled over everyone present. If humanity had truly been secretly developing this kind of technology for decades, right under the Directorate's supposedly watchful eye, it raised uncomfortable questions about the effectiveness of their entire treaty system, and about how many other secrets the humans might still be hiding. This cannot become public knowledge beyond what has already spread, another council member said urgently. If our other treaty subjects learn that humanity successfully deceived us for decades, it could inspire similar defiance throughout our territories. It is already too public, Threxa said grimly. The story has spread far beyond our ability to contain it. Every major power in this region of the galaxy now knows that a Directorate fleet was defeated by a single human warship. We cannot undo that. We can only decide how to respond to it. The council debated for hours, weighing options that ranged from immediate military retaliation to cautious diplomatic outreach. In the end, cooler heads prevailed, largely due to the sobering reality of what Korvath's fleet had actually witnessed. No one on the council was eager to authorize a larger military response without a much clearer understanding of exactly what humanity was truly capable of. We will send a formal diplomatic delegation, Threxa finally announced. "Along with observers from our military intelligence division, we need accurate information before we decide on any further course of action." And Grand Admiral Korvath. Korvath straightened, bracing himself for what he suspected was coming. "Your fleet command has been suspended, pending a full review of this incident," Threxa said coldly. "You are dismissed." As Korvath left the council chamber in disgrace, Velen, who had stood quietly through the entire proceeding, felt a complicated mixture of emotions. He had been right about the danger humanity posed, right to be cautious when others were not. But there was little satisfaction in being right about something so potentially dangerous for the entire galaxy. Back on Earth, the aftermath of the battle brought its own significant challenges. The council that had authorized the Prometheus's deployment now faced the difficult task of managing humanity's sudden, unwanted spotlight on the galactic stage. Within days of the battle, formal communication requests began arriving from multiple alien governments, all eager to understand exactly what had happened and what it meant for their own relationships with Earth. Director Okafor called an emergency meeting to address the flood of incoming diplomatic requests. Ambassador Elena Voss, a career diplomat who had spent years quietly managing Earth's limited interactions with the wider galaxy under the treaty's restrictions, was tasked with coordinating humanity's official response. "We're receiving requests from the Velkari Trade Union, the Threll Assembly, and at least 6 other governments," Elena reported during the meeting. "Everyone wants answers, and everyone wants them quickly. What do we tell them?" Director Okafor asked. "The truth," Marcus said firmly, having returned from Forge Site Zero to participate in the discussion. "We tell them exactly what happened. The Directorate fleet entered our territory without authorization. We warned them repeatedly, and when they chose to attack anyway, we defended ourselves. We're not looking for a war with anyone. But we're also not going to pretend the last 80 years of forced weakness were acceptable, or that we intend to return to that state now." Elena nodded slowly, already considering the diplomatic implications of such a direct approach. "It's a bold strategy, Commander, but perhaps it's exactly what's needed. For 80 years, we've negotiated from a position of assumed weakness. Perhaps it's time we spoke from a position of genuine strength instead." Director Okafor looked around the table at the assembled council members, each of them carrying the weight of decisions that would shape humanity's future among the stars. "Very well," she said finally. "Ambassador Voss, prepare formal responses to each delegation request. Commander Cole, Dr. Chen, I want a full assessment of our remaining capabilities, and what we're willing to share with these delegations, and what we intend to keep private for now." As the meeting continued, deep beneath the asteroid that housed Forge Site Zero, Amara Chen walked slowly through the shipyard's construction bays, past the space where the Prometheus had once rested, now empty, since the ship remained on patrol duty near the edge of the system. But the Prometheus was no longer alone in these bays. Scaffolding surrounded 2 more massive hull frames, early stages of construction, on what would eventually become the 2nd and 3rd warships in humanity's growing fleet. 15 years of secret preparation had given humanity far more than a single ship. It had given them the knowledge, the resources, and the industrial capacity to build an entire fleet, one ship at a time. The galaxy had panicked at the sight of a single human warship. Amara wondered, with a mixture of pride and apprehension, how they would react when they eventually learned exactly how much more was still to come. 3 weeks after the battle in the Sol system, the first official delegations began arriving at Earth. It was an unprecedented moment in human history, the first time alien representatives had been formally invited to visit humanity's homeworld since the end of the First Contact War, 80 years earlier. Security around the arrivals was tight, and public attention was even tighter. As news of the approaching delegations spread across every corner of Earth's own information networks, Ambassador Elena Voss stood at the main reception platform in Geneva, watching as the first shuttle descended through the atmosphere, carrying representatives from the Caldrath Directorate itself. It had taken careful negotiation to arrange this meeting, and Elena knew that everything about this first encounter would set the tone for humanity's future relationship with the wider galaxy. The shuttle landed smoothly, and its doors opened to reveal a delegation led by High Counselor Threxa herself, accompanied by several military and diplomatic advisors. Elena stepped forward to greet them, her expression calm and professional despite the enormity of the moment. "Counselor Threxa," she said, "welcome to Earth. On behalf of humanity, we appreciate your willingness to engage in direct dialogue. Threxa studied Elena carefully, her expression difficult to read. Ambassador Voss, I trust you understand the significance of this visit. The Directorate has come seeking clarity, not confrontation. That's exactly what we hope to hear, Elena replied. If you'll follow me, we've prepared a full briefing, along with the opportunity to see exactly what humanity has accomplished over the past several decades. The delegation was led to a secure facility, where Commander Marcus Cole and Dr. Amara Chen waited to begin the formal presentation. Unlike the secrecy that had defined Forge Site Zero for so many years, this meeting was designed to be as transparent as humanity was willing to allow, a careful balance between honesty and continued caution about revealing every detail of their capabilities. Counselor Threxa, Marcus began, once everyone had settled into the briefing room. 80 years ago, humanity signed the Technological Restriction Treaty, following our defeat in the First Contact War. We accepted those terms because we had no other choice. But the treaty also taught us an important lesson, that a species without the ability to defend itself will always be vulnerable to the will of stronger powers. He gestured to a large display screen, which came to life showing detailed schematics of Forge Site Zero, along with a timeline stretching back nearly 2 decades. What you saw in the Sol system was not some sudden development, Marcus continued. It was the result of nearly 20 years of careful, deliberate work. We used the technology captured during the First War as a foundation, and we built upon it, using our own research and innovation. The ESS Prometheus was the first result of that effort, but I want to be clear with you, Counselor. It will not be the last. Threxa's advisors exchanged uneasy glances as the display shifted to show images of the additional ships currently under construction within the hidden shipyard. The scale of humanity's secret preparation was clearly far greater than even the most exaggerated rumors had suggested. You understand, Threxa said carefully, that this revelation places the Directorate in a difficult position. The treaty specifically prohibited this kind of development. Our entire relationship with your species has been built on the assumption of your continued technological limitations. We understand that completely, Amara said, stepping forward to join the conversation. And that's exactly why we've invited your delegation here today. We're not interested in maintaining the deception any longer, Counselor. Humanity has grown beyond the limitations that treaty imposed on us. What we're seeking now is a new arrangement, one built on mutual respect rather than forced submission. And if the Directorate refuses to accept these new terms? Threxa asked, her tone carefully neutral. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Then we hope it doesn't come to that, Counselor. Our goal was never to become an enemy of the Directorate, or of any other power in this galaxy. But we also will not return to being a species defined by weakness and restriction. We're prepared to defend our sovereignty, just as we did in the Sol system. We would much rather build a relationship based on cooperation and mutual benefit. The negotiations that followed stretched across several intense days, with Threxa's delegation carefully weighing every aspect of humanity's new position. It was clear that the old treaty could no longer stand, not after what had happened, but crafting a new agreement that satisfied both sides proved far more complicated than anyone had initially expected. Meanwhile, additional delegations continued arriving from other corners of the galaxy, each eager to establish their own understanding with this newly revealed power. Trade speaker Nissa arrived from the Velkari Trade Union, immediately expressing interest in establishing formal trade relations, recognizing an opportunity that her cautious, commercially minded species could not afford to ignore. Your technology represents significant value, Nissa explained during her own meeting with Elena Voss. The Velkari Trade Union would be interested in establishing mutually beneficial trade agreements, particularly regarding certain technological exchanges that could benefit both our peoples. Elena smiled slightly at the proposal. We appreciate the interest, trade speaker. Humanity has always valued fair and honest trade. I think we can find common ground that benefits everyone involved. Even the Threll Assembly, despite General Vrask's earlier aggressive posturing, eventually sent a smaller diplomatic delegation, though their approach remained notably more cautious and reserved compared to the other visiting powers. The demonstration of the Prometheus's capabilities had clearly given even the most aggressive factions within their military reason to reconsider any thoughts of exploiting perceived human weakness. As the weeks passed, humanity's position within the wider galactic community began to shift in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few months earlier. The old treaty was formally dissolved, replaced by a new series of agreements that recognized Earth as a sovereign power, free to develop its own technology and defend its own territory, without the oversight and restriction that had defined the previous 80 years. On a quiet evening several months after the initial battle, Amara Chen stood once again at the viewport inside Forge Site Zero, watching as the construction bays hummed with activity. The second warship in humanity's growing fleet, named the ESS Resolute, was now nearing completion, its hull gleaming under the bright construction lights. Behind it, framework for a third and even fourth vessel had already begun taking shape. Marcus joined her at the viewport, both of them reflecting quietly on how much had changed since that tense day when a single alien scout ship had first discovered their secret. "We did it," Marcus said softly. "Everything we worked for, everything Dr. Halverson and everyone before us sacrificed for, it actually worked." Amara nodded, a small smile finally breaking through the exhaustion of the past several months. "It's strange, isn't it? For so long, we hid what we were building, because we were afraid of what would happen if the galaxy discovered our secret too soon. Now here we are, working openly, building an entire fleet with the knowledge and, dare I say, respect of powers we once feared." "Respect built on strength," Marcus added. "I think that's the lesson here. The galaxy didn't panic because we threatened anyone unprovoked. They panicked because they finally understood that humanity would never again be an easy target, that we had earned the right to stand as equals rather than subjects." The Rito was cold. Far above Earth, the ESS Prometheus continued its patrol along the boundaries of the Sol system, a silent guardian watching over the world it had been built to protect. Its crew had grown accustomed to the occasional curious scout ship passing through the region, though none dared approach with anything less than careful respect these days. Word of humanity's transformation continued spreading throughout the galaxy, carried by traders, diplomats, and travelers who had witnessed firsthand the remarkable changes taking place within the Sol system. Some species remained wary, uncertain how to interpret this sudden shift in the balance of power. Others saw genuine opportunity, eager to forge new relationships with a species that had proven both its capability and its restraint. Back in Geneva, Director Okafor addressed the full council one final time, marking the formal conclusion of the crisis that had begun with a single scout ship's discovery months earlier. "We stand today at the beginning of a new chapter for humanity," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the historic moment. "For 80 years, we lived under the shadow of forced weakness, hiding our true potential out of necessity and fear. That chapter has finally closed. What comes next is entirely up to us, to build the kind of relationship with this galaxy that reflects who we truly are, not who others once forced us to pretend to be." Around the room, the assembled representatives nodded in solemn agreement, each of them aware that the decisions made in the coming years would shape humanity's place among the stars for generations to come. And deep within the asteroid that had once held humanity's greatest secret, the doors of Forge Site Zero remained open now, no longer hidden in darkness, but standing as a proud symbol of everything humanity had quietly built during those long years of patient preparation. The shipyard that had once panicked the galaxy with a single warship now stood ready to build an entire fleet, and the galaxy, still adjusting to this remarkable new reality, watched carefully to see exactly what humanity would build next.